go. Thank you all for coming and joining us for reactive communications and how we can all hopefully reduce some of the urgency I suspect many are feeling right now in our communications and all of the variety of things that are getting thrown our way. And our hope today is that everyone will come away with some tools and hopefully just some steps to be able to reach out to other people to get ideas and to be able to share resources together and just help us all take kind of a deep breath and know that they're trying to cause us chaos so that we lose focus. And that's part of the whole thing here. So, yeah, we'll just go through some exercises and some work together to try to bring things into some more focus for us all. So please, if you can take a moment not only to update the name that is showing up for you if you would like to, but also um, please share your name, department or role, pronouns, where you're coming from. If you don't know your land acknowledgement, please do share it with us. And any accessibility needs that you have or would like to share via chat or vocally. If chat isn't available to you, please feel free to turn on your mic and let us know now. Okay. Thanks again for that. Before I move on, I'm just going to paste our slide deck into the chat one more time, as well as our resource folder. And you'll be able to access the participant list in the resource folder, as well as some of the tools that we're going to be using today. So feel free to hop in there also. And here we go. So just a quick reminder of our Zoom controls. I had this one up at the beginning for us just in case so that people can change their names from our little glitch that's happening. And it's so great to see so many familiar names, I should say. And of course, as always, feel free to keep your video off if you so choose or join us on screen if you prefer. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Rooted, our mission is to connect people and to hold these kinds of spaces together where we can really reduce urgency and come together and, build into positive social change as a community. So, we just really appreciate you all being here and joining with us today in this work. If you're interested in learning more about Rooted, I can put the link to our values into the chat as well, and you can learn a little bit more about us. All right, so before we get started, we always like to go through our community agreements and give everyone a chance not just to read through them, but to share any additions that they would like to. I'll paste these into the chat as well, and then we'll just take a moment to read them out loud. So, one, approach with curiosity, be open to new ways of doing and thinking, sit with discomfort, expect and accept non-closure, engage and be present. Practice mindful listening. Please raise your virtual hand to share your thoughts and try not to multitask when we're in this time together. I know that is very hard, but it's also just helpful so that you can feel calmer as well. Be aware of power dynamics. Consider the space you consume and share space. Speak from your experience, assume best intent, and acknowledge the impact of your words on others. Accept restraints as presented. Ideate yes and. Share ideas freely and openly. Embrace being messy and put aside perfectionism, especially in this time we have together today. This is the place to experiment and for us to ideate together. What's shared here stays here, and what's learned here leaves here. And then be willing to slow down, notice, and name what's coming up in the room. Take care of yourself and have fun. Anything else that anyone would like to add or any adjustments they'd like to make? All right, great. then I will move into a short introduction of myself and then pass it over to Ian. So my name is Val. My pronouns are she, they. I'm the Director of Strategy here at Rooted. I reside on Ohlone land in the San Francisco East Bay. And today I am wearing some Rooted paraphernalia, a black Rooted hoodie, and I have red hair and green rimmed glasses with white skin. Over to you, Ian.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Madrigal. I use they or he pronouns. I'm a communications strategist and facilitator who works with Rooted as well as other projects in my own consulting company. Um, I live in Piscataway territory and I have dark brown hair with a beard, glasses, and I'm wearing a white and purple striped shirt right now. Um, All right, let's talk about our agenda for today. We've got a lot of good stuff for you in a short period of time. We just got through the welcome section. Now we're going to move into best practices, which includes preparing for a crisis, elements of a communications plan, and engaging your team. Then at 11:30 Pacific, we are going to move into scenario solving in small groups. We'll do that for about 15 minutes together, and then we'll have a share out and Q&A, and then move into our closing. All right, so let's get into it. Best practices. If we can go to the next slide, preparing for a crisis. So crisis communications requires preparation, empathy, and alignment with organizational values. By planning ahead and prioritizing team involvement and evaluating your response, your organization can navigate crises effectively while maintaining trust and credibility. So let's talk about what that looks like. The first thing, of course, that we want to do is, I think that's the wrong slide.
Oops, oops, oops.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there we go. Building a comprehensive plan. So step one is identifying potential risks. In the last 2 months, we've all seen a lot of brand new potential risks that we might want to think about. But typically, we're going to consider various types of crises. These could be societal or political concerns, environmental events, security threats like cyber attacks, as well as economic challenges, funding cuts, layoffs. Could also be internal issues like HR scandals or employee ethics issues, programmatic failures, or retention issues. So those are the kind of things you want to keep in mind today as we're practicing this. Step two, once we've identified our potential risks, we want to establish our objectives. So this applies to each risk that you identify. You want to define the goals of your response. So, for example, if we're thinking about program closure, we might want to notify affected stakeholders, protect our reputation, and outline preventative measures. When we are doing this, we also want to think about timeline. So we want to always consider how to balance urgency with a comprehensive response. Step three, we want to identify our audiences. So by this, we mean we need to consider who needs to be collaborated or communicated with. So again, depending on the situation, that could involve employees, board members, community members, and stakeholders. Could also include the press or partner organizations, local leaders, really depending on what situation you're responding to. But the important thing here is to make sure you're cultivating positive relationships with these groups of people, because those relationships are what are going to help you through a crisis. Step four, we're going to develop key messaging. This is really a focus on essential information, especially in a time of crisis. We want to embrace brevity. We want to share concise, clear messages that cut through the noise. We want to lead with honesty. I think that's especially important when we're communicating to stakeholders or internal folks at our organization. We want to acknowledge uncertainty, but also provide as much clarity as possible. And honest, direct messaging really resonates with all sorts of audiences. We also always want to make sure that our key messaging is reinforcing our organizational values. You want to highlight how your values guide decision making during the crisis. And you also want to share how these values influence both immediate actions and long-term plans. Finally, step five, we want to identify and utilize multiple channels to get our message out into the world. So we want to avoid relying solely on one communication medium. Instead, we want to leverage a mix of, email or text updates, press releases, social media channels, newsletters, and many more possibilities. Um, and when we're thinking about communicating across channels, we also want to keep in mind what we call the three R's, which is review, repeat, and reinforce messages across platforms. So you want to make sure that your key messages are consistent, regardless of who you're communicating to or how, especially in a crisis, because that's how you're going to build trust with these groups. So that was a lot of things to throw at you. If you have the slides, there are notes in there which go through what I talk about if you want to look closer at them. But I think let's talk through an example scenario so we can kind of see how this plays out. So let's consider this real life scenario. This actually happened in the last few weeks, unfortunately. Trump's Department of Health and Human Services proposed a rule that would revoke health insurance across, or sorry, reduce health insurance access for DACA recipients who were brought to the United States as children. And for the record, the rule does many other things. It creates new barriers for ACA enrollment in general. It also bans gender affirming care for transgender people. The rule is currently open for public comment until April 11th. So, go ahead and make a comment if you would like. But for this scenario, let's imagine that we are a coalition of nonprofits that advocate for the rights of immigrants. So to push back against the rule, we might think about three goals or outcomes. We might want to drive public comments opposing the rule. We likely want to generate media coverage about what's at stake, both for our community and others. And we would want to get allies in Congress to speak out and push back. As far as our timeline, we would want to do this as much as possible before the comment period closes. So that puts our timeline between now and April 11th, which is roughly 2 weeks. So we have a lot to do. Now, if we go to think about our audiences, here I would say our main audience would be DACA recipients and allies. Those are probably the folks that we can mobilize most to get them to file public comment. We also want to reach out to journalists who, cover this in their beat, since we want to generate media coverage. Of course, we also want to reach our congressional allies. Because this is an HHS rule, we probably want to focus on members of the committees that oversee that department. Finally, we might consider partner organizations who represent other groups harmed by the proposed rule. So in this case, it could be like trans rights organizations, of course, any nonprofit that advocates for healthcare access as well, so that we can coordinate our messages and also act in solidarity with one another. I think especially in moments of crisis, it is very important to connect with allied groups so that our messaging reinforces one another rather than hinders related efforts. Typically, we recommend tailoring our key messages to each audience, but since we have limited time, we're focusing on one overarching message here. So the key message, this rule would strip life-saving healthcare from DACA recipients and other vulnerable communities and take away key protection for all Americans under the Affordable Care Act. So here we wanted to emphasize the life and death consequences of this rule, and obviously centering our constituency of DACA recipients, but also demonstrating solidarity with the other groups and stressing the danger that this rule would pose to all Americans. Finally, the channels that we pick here, pretty much the ones I suggested earlier: email, text alerts, social media. Both of those are really to target the folks that we want to drive to file comments. Press releases would be to target the journalists, and then direct communication with allies in Congress that we want to step up and speak about the rule. So yeah, the challenge is you always really want to make sure you can tie back to each audience. All right, so that's an example of those first 5 steps in building a comprehensive plan. I'm going to hand it over to Val now to walk us through the next step. Oh, sorry. Now we try. Forgot about this part.
That's okay.
Yeah, we don't want to go through the content too quickly without you being able to practice it. So first we have a 5-minute period where we're going to encourage people to do some solo reflection. So we have a worksheet here that you can copy. Um, you won't be able to finish all this in 5 minutes, but we want you to start thinking, like, pick one risk you want to work on, define 3 response goals, and start to think through audiences, key messages, and channels. We're going to be building on this work the whole time, so you don't have to finish it all in those first 5 minutes, but just kind of get the ball rolling.
The next part we wanted to chat about was keeping your team involved, and that really this is helping you create a proactive strategy so that things don't feel so urgent in the moment. And we'll go through some different things here of how to put a decision-making strategy into place. So first and foremost, and we'll talk about this in just a second, is using some sort of decision-making model. For Rooted, we use a DACY model, and we'll go into that in just a minute. But this really helps you define your roles and responsibilities ahead of time so that it's all in place and everybody knows what's happening and who needs to be involved in different kinds of decisions. And it's really the core of all of this work so that you can have a structure in place that is inclusive and outlined clearly for everybody. The next two things here around the decision tree and developing templates is again trying to help you create a structured method to organize responses for different scenarios. So it's not just first knowing who needs to be involved in why we're making this decision, what we're putting out into the community, so on and so forth, but actually like who is going to be a part of the different kinds of responses that need to be created. And this last piece around developing templates is kind of the key to all of this as well, of thinking through the lens of like, what are some boilerplates that you could have? And that's part of why we wanted to create the little resource for you to be able to use and duplicate on your own, so that you can identify the different kinds of risks that you might be facing and have some boilerplate scenarios already set up ahead of time. This way, you're acknowledging the kinds of crises that might come into play in the weeks, days, years to come. You can have a brief description, the actions that you plan to take, and then whatever follow-up details included in that as well. And even though it takes a little bit of time to get all this stuff set up, it will save you so much time in the long run and really reduce the stress on your plate when the things pop up in the moment. So going deeper into DACY, and again, this one is one that Rooted uses and it works incredibly well for us. The D stands for the drivers. So they're the people that are coordinating logistics. You can think of them through the lens of like a project manager, or the person that's just kind of organizing everything for you. Then your approvers are the people who are responsible for making sure that the process is equitable. For us at Rooted, we always have there be at least 2 people. The word approver isn't necessarily like this is the final decision maker by any means. It's really, again, the person that's sort of the people that are kind of holding that the process is including all of the different voices that need to be a part of it, that roles are clearly delineated, and so the driver is sort of driving the process itself, but that leaves a little bit of the strategy of the work in the approver's hands. The contributors are the people that are uncovering any sticking points, like it says here, thinking about the varying viewpoints that need to be included. And they're really the ones being asked to share their views and share some of those opposing thoughts that might be going on so that everything gets sort of, fleshed out as you're going through the process in the moment. But again, all of these pieces you would have worked out ahead of time so that in the moment it's much more smooth. And then the last piece is thinking about who needs to be informed, whether those are internal or external stakeholders. And we'll go into this a little bit more in a second. But some of the questions that we like to pose in the DACY model in general is one, have we identified all the contributors that are needed in this decision-making process? Who's represented and who's not? Does this process prioritize the stakeholders who are most impacted by the decision that is being made? So, example, are there staff members that are going to need to implement this or program participants, so on and so forth? Then have all the contributors in this process had a chance to share concerns through multiple venues and have those concerns been addressed? And I know when we're moving quickly, it's often difficult to catch all of these things, but that's again why if you do it ahead of time and you have some of these structures in place and everyone understands what needs to happen and what's going to happen, you can move through it much more smoothly and quickly. And then the last question that's always important, is this the right time for a decision or is there a better time? Do you need to comment on this particular thing, whatever that is? Or is this one that you all collectively decide we're going to pass on? For Rooted, we do this in our Slack channel like all the time. And it works really well because we know the process that needs to go through for any decision that is going to be made. So again, if you want to click into the sample that we shared, I put a little screenshot there on the right. But in this case, if we're thinking about the drivers and the approvers and contributors and informed in our scenario, the drivers and the facilitators could be comm managers. In this case, let's say it's Val and Ian who are, sort of hosting this coalition of organizations coming together to work on this. The approvers, the people that are making sure all voices are included, are our coalition comm directors or any program directors that might be a part of it, any of the EDs of the organization, or any other team members. And then the contributors might be other coalition organization leaders who are part of it. And you'd, of course, want to be putting in real people into all of these slots, not just, I'm sort of just framing who it might be. And then the last is the people that are informed. There might be other team members, board members, your congressional allies, DACA recipients, journalists, or other partner organizations that you're going to want to send information out and provide them with whatever follow-up that they're going to need.
All right. The last step of this that we recommend is engaging your team. So we're going to think about that in a few different ways. First of all, since we're thinking about crises and crisis communications, we want to train leadership and spokespeople to communicate in these ways. So this includes active listening. We want to be able to understand team members' emotions and perspectives. We want to make sure that people know how to have coaching conversations to help team members find their own solutions. And then when we think about external communications, we really want to focus on media training to ensure consistent, empathetic messaging and presence. And I think media training is really important. Only about a quarter of CEOs and spokespeople actually receive media training every year. So without practicing these tough questions, those representing your organization may send inconsistent messages or act in a way that the public perceives as unsympathetic. As someone who's done a lot of media, no matter how well trained you are, it's a very high pressure situation and a lot can go wrong. So the more practice, the better. Next, we want to prioritize team well-being. Self-care comes first. Leaders must address their own well-being before helping others. We want to think about transparency, acknowledging the emotional toll of the crisis on yourself and your team. And also, as part of crisis communications planning, don't forget to take steps to protect the staff and supporters from potential political attacks, doxing, hacking, all of those kinds of things, especially for those that are kind of the public-facing roles. Then we're going to want to solicit feedback to understand concerns. This could be in the form of anonymous communication like forms, polls, and surveys, as well as team debriefs, coalition debriefs to gather direct insights. Once we have that feedback, we want to incorporate it, of course. We want to monitor and adapt, evaluate clarity, timeliness, and impact so we can adjust in real time. This is not something you only do at the end. You want to kind of do throughout. Then finally, when we are at the end of the crisis, it's helpful to do a post-crisis review where we notice and reflect on what went well, what did not, and what can be improved for the future. All right, so now you try again. We'll give folks another few minutes to fill out more of their sheet. before we move into small groups. Let's
So
say,
now you get to chat with one another using your scenarios or the scenario that we provided, whatever feels most comfortable and useful to you. We'll put everyone into some breakout rooms so that you can chat about this work together, and hopefully make some headway and get some feedback.
all right. So we only have a couple minutes left here. We wanted to do a very quick share out. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask while we're still here in the space, or if anyone has something that clicked for them, a scenario that they're thinking about, they want to share with the group, the floor is open. All right, Gisela.
Hey there. Um, this is maybe overly nerdy or intellectual, but I was curious to hear more about the differences between in your model, the differences between the audiences and the informed folks.
Yeah, yeah, actually another group asked that as well. The way I think about it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Val, she uses Daisy more than I do, but I think of informed as people that you're kind of just keeping in the loop. So again, it could be groups that you're responsible to, like a board of directors. It could be maybe partner groups that you want to, keep them up to date on what you're doing. Whereas your audience is really the key group that you're trying to get to take action of some sort. So there might be some crises where you're trying to inform your audience and that's your main objective. So it might be some overlap, but for the most part, your audience is going to be more like your constituency, or like the target of your campaign.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else, feel free to come off mute or raise your hand.
Hello all. My name's Jay. I have a question that did not come up in my group, but I think the biggest thing that we struggle with balancing here when we do our best and tackle crisis comms planning well, and then the where we get snagged so much is turnaround time for all the different approvers, input, all that, right? Like between drafting the statement, having legal look at it, having the two co-executive directors look at it, get it back out, right? Like, do you guys have any, I know this is a huge question, but like just any advice on being able to respond rapidly but still get the buy-in and approval that we need?
Hmm.
I mean, to me, there's like expectation setting that, and I don't know how much that's already happened within your organization, but in a time of calm, like coming together and having really clear expectations of what the expected turnaround for these things are, and have everyone agree to them so that that way, and like sharing the piece around that, like by us making this agreement now, we're reducing our urgency and that like stress later. So if we can please like make this community agreement together that this is the process we're going to go through so that nobody is stressing about it when it actually comes up, or additional stress beyond what already, like it's sometimes in these kinds of conversations, we turn it into a self-care conversation, you know, that it's like we're all under this immense pressure all the time. So like what are the things we can collectively agree on so that when the moment arises, we know that you're going to get pulled in all these different directions, but we have a set amount of time that we've all agreed that this is going to happen and that we're going to stick to it. And in some ways, that's sort of like it's a cultural thing more so than anything else.
Yeah, I would just add that I'm also a big fan, if it's possible in your organization, of saying, you have till this date and time to object or it's moving forward. And I think always just keep in mind too that not everyone is great about email. So calling, following up in person, making sure that they're aware that the deadline is coming can be a good approach.
Yeah, actually, that brings up a really good point. One of the things we've also done on our team is gone through and created user manuals for all of us so that we know the best ways to communicate with one another and already like know, especially like what Ian just said, like is email better, is Slack better, is whatever the thing is. And so even those internal communication channels are clearly laid out, and then you'll know ahead of time as well. All right, anything else? Oh, we're already at time. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was
Do
gonna say, I
people?
think we need to
Oh
move.
my gosh. Okay. So super quick, we have a bunch of resources listed out here for everyone if you want to take a look through, and we'll share all of this in follow-up as well as always. Please take our survey. I luckily had already put it into the chat. We're trying a new little format here where we cut these down a little bit to just 60 minutes instead of 90. So we'd love to hear what you think about that. And just generally any other topics that you all are interested in. We always are iterating and trying to improve this work with each roundtable and cohort and all that we do. So last piece here, upcoming events. We have our narrative change roundtable happening next month, and we'll also be starting our narrative cohort, which Ian and one of our other community partners, Nadia, will be co-hosting and facilitating from May through October. And the cost is a sliding scale, and it will be 75-minute sessions, I believe, twice a month. So we're really excited about that to kick off these narrative change ways of approaching our work together. And just before we go, any last questions, please feel free to turn on your mic or ask them in the chat. And any insights that you'd like to share, please put that in the chat as well. And I can say this has been a pleasure, and it's always great to meet new people and see all of our returning friends join us. So thank you again for coming. Anything you'd like to say, Ian?
Just hope to see some of you at the narrative training that we're doing next month. And yeah, hopefully some of you can make your way into our cohort as well. It's going to be a new initiative that we're really excited about. Thanks everybody for coming.
Put those links in the chat also. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.